This story is called Emily and Roger. It begins with comments by Dr. Len Schuster, who was Emily's counsellor. I first met Emily, not her real name, about 2 years ago. She came to me because she had had issues with relationships. Emily was 33 years old, and she worked in the HR department of a financial services organization. It was ironical that she'd come to my office because of interpersonal problems, because a major part of her professional life involved dealing with issues such as power imbalances and the resolution of interpersonal matters such as abusive work relationships, harassment, both sexual and otherwise. Emily had, by her own account, a conventional suburban upbringing. Through university, she had normal opposite-sex relationships, ranging from casual hookups to serious romances. After university, she had a number of longer-term relationships, one of which had led to an engagement in her late 20s. Whether this would have turned out to be the love of her life, I can't say, but Emily saw it that way. Consequently, she was devastated when she discovered Clyde cheating on her with her proposed matron of honour. It was an unforgivable betrayal. The wedding was cancelled, the invitations rescinded. It caused extreme personal embarrassment to both Emily and her parents. Emily tried to recreate the romantic ambience that she experienced with Clyde through various dating sites. She described herself as having a normally active libido, though I perceived that her sexual appetite might have been better described as hearty. Her search for eternal love did not allow for any sense of friendship first. Not surprisingly, therefore, when the flames of eternal lust had died down, the brittleness of these romances became obvious. Breakup followed and the quest for love began again. Romance then flowered in a most inappropriate garden. Nick was Emily's supervisor in the HR department where she worked. Their relation began with flirting in a friendly, joshing style, but it soon progressed to lunching together in the deli down the street from the office, under cover of work, of course. Nick was married with 2 young children and an understandably harried wife. Nick found himself thinking more and more of the flirtatious blonde with the slinky walk and the come-hither look. Both parties soon harboured thoughts of taking their relationship to the next level. That next level was breached one evening when Nick gave Emily a ride home, but stopped en route for what was once called parking. The burgeoning affair broke every rule in the book. The world of HR severely discourages romances between co-workers. Should they occur, the 2 employees were supposed to report the budding dalliance to human resources. But to whom should these 2 lovebirds report their newfound status? To themselves? Nick was Emily's supervisor. Their affair was absolutely forbidden according to the company handbook on employee deportment. The major function of HR departments in the modern era is to protect senior management from litigation by employees. Romantic affairs that end badly are an ever-present hazard. Hence, a main function of HR is to hold annual mandatory training sessions to ensure that all employees are fully aware of what types of interpersonal interactions are appropriate or otherwise. The stated goal of these stupefyingly dull workshops is a well-functioning workplace with harmonious employee interactions. The actual goal, which all but the newest and most naive employees understand, is different. It is to ensure that should litigation rear its ugly head, the company's lawyers can point to mandatory training to show the company had done everything possible. In other words, cover your ass. Nick and Emily were in contravention of the most basic of these HR rules. It was clearly a firing offence. But love is blind and lust even more so. The affair progressed inexorably from lunch at the neighbourhood deli to lunch-hour trysts at hot chic motels and sweaty encounters in Nick's car on quiet, darkened streets. There was even an intimate after-hours tryst on Emily's desk, which stained the pages of the latest Ontario Labour Code training manual. One day, Emily arrived in my office unannounced, distraught and red-hot with anger. The previous evening, Nick had come over to her apartment by arrangement. Emily had mood lighting on and was arrayed in sheer lingerie. Instead of the anticipated shagathon, Nick had gone managerial on her. Their affair was over, he told her. It had to stop right now. Nick pointed out what they already knew, that their liaison was contrary to company policy. Moreover, it was she, not he, had been the instigator, he told her, rather untruthfully. They could both lose their jobs, but it'd be worse for him because he had a family and a mortgage to support. A half box of tissues later, Emily finally became coherent. I forbore from reminding her that I had cautioned her that this particular romantic entanglement might not end well. Ultimately, I suggested gently that perhaps a break away from the unending search for Mr. Right might be helpful. It would give Emily the chance to think about what she wanted from a suitor, specifically whether she was looking primarily for a hot date or for a long-term loving partner. I tried to suggest that maybe a pet might offer her some company in the meantime, and that this might lead her to meet people with similar interests. "I'm not looking for a fucking gerbil," she shouted. "I want someone to share my life with." For that she stormed out. A week later she left this message on my answering machine. "I did what you said. I got myself a dog." Part 2 is now Emily. By the time I walked out of Dr. Schuster's office, I really hated the man. I'd been paying him for months, while he just sat across from me with a pad and pen on a little side table, making notes whatever I said. "And how did that make you feel?" was the question he asked me most often. What I felt like saying was, "I feel pissed off. You keep asking me the same question." Of course I was depressed. Wouldn't you be if your love life kept collapsing around you? Dr. Schuster kept going back to what had happened with Clyde and Mary Ann like it was a magic key to my soul, whereas it was just this fucking great big betrayal. I walk into our apartment. There's loud music on, so they didn't hear me come in. There on the Chesterfield's Clyde. So far up Mary Ann, her pubic hair's entangled. Her clothes all over the floor, a stink of sex, and the music's so loud they don't hear me and stop when I see them at it. I grabbed one of Clyde's precious wrestling trophies and threw it at them just as they climaxed. That stopped them. Clyde pulled away, jumped up, and I watched as his erection depleted. He dribbled semen onto my favourite rug. At least it didn't stain the sofa. There was nothing to be said. They didn't even try, just grabbed their clothes and attempted to regain a bit of modesty. Mary Ann left of her own accord, and I told Clyde to get out and never come back. So, Dr. Schuster, how did that make me feel? Angry, betrayed, used. I know your type. I can see it when we're in counselling. What I've been feeling almost since we first met is that you've been sizing me up, see whether my overactive libido might extend to you. Yes, I have noticed the sofa over there on the other wall, across from the two chairs and the little table. But I've got news for you. I find you repulsive, your turtleneck and your paunch. I'll admit I did think more about what you said the last time we met. It might be a good idea to take time away from the dating scene after the disaster with Nick, selfish jerk. Find out me as a bit of nookie on the side. When he figured out he might lose his job, he tossed me away like a used condom. The affair was mutual, but he made it clear that if the rubber hit the road, I was going to take the fall. And that's what happened. I didn't know it at the time, but Nick's little break-up speech had only come about because his wife Zoe found a receipt for the Parkview Motel in the pocket of one of his jackets. She challenged him about it. Although he denied knowing anything about it, she didn't believe him. Over lunch with her friend Sarah, Zoe confessed that she thought that Nick was cheating on her. Sarah, it turned out, was one of Nick's spurned former conquests, and she found a way to get the information to Nick's supervisor, the head of HR. We were called in separately. The motel receipt was produced. I denied any knowledge of it, of course, but Nick had no explanation. As I suspected he would, he fessed up and tried to throw me under the bus. However, the bus rolled over both of us and we both got fired. So I'm out of a job and waiting till I can claim our EI. I was spending all day in my apartment writing job applications, feeling lonely and sorry for myself, hoping I could get another job before I had to go crawling back to my parents' place at 35. Why not get myself a dog? It'd be company without strings. I'd have to walk it every day and it would get me out of my apartment. I originally thought of getting a dog from the Humane Society, but then I thought of Kijiji, and that's how Roger came into my life. Part 3 is Roger. Although I never knew my father, I consider that I had a happy childhood. I came into the world in the corner of a disused barn. My mother was a gentle, caring soul who did her very best to look after us and nurture me, my 3 brothers and 2 sisters. Mom taught us what we needed to survive in the world, allowed us to play together as a family. I recall those days with much fondness. When I became a little older, it was winter. We were all cold and hungry. We would probably have died except for a couple of children, out exploring, came upon us huddled together for warmth. "Look," they cried, "a dog and her puppies." A little while later, a band marked Humane Society on the sides came close to the barn. A man with a net caught Mom and gentle hands picked up my siblings and me. We went with him in the van and were taken to a building with lots of dogs in cages. The dogs of all sizes and shapes. A lot of barking as we introduced ourselves to each other. It was a strange existence. We had plenty of food, the place was warm, but there was nowhere to run about and play. Sometimes humans would come and walk along the outside of our cages. They would talk to each other about us. "He's got a nice face," or "she's terribly thin," or "I think he's too big for our apartment." Oftentimes they'd then just go away, but at other times they'd take one of us away with them. One day 4 people came and looked hard into our cage. "We're looking for a puppy," they said. They kept comparing my brothers and sisters and me as to which they liked best. After a lot of conversation, the 2 children said they liked me the best. They all went away for a few minutes. When they came back, they took me out of the cage. I didn't know what was happening, so I didn't even have time to say goodbye to my mom and my brothers and sisters. I never saw them again. So I went with this new family in a car. 2 children were very excited. They lived in quite a big house. It was warm and smelled nice. I had a special place to sleep in a basket with a blanket in it. It soon got to smell of me personally, so I liked the blanket very much, even though I missed my old family at first. The 2 adults in my new family were called Monty and Becky. The 2 children were Haley and Jacob. They called me Roger. Monty was clearly the alpha member of the family. I could tell because he was the biggest. Also, he usually mounted Becky when they were in bed together. I wasn't allowed in their bedroom at night, but I could always smell it when they were mating. Becky's scent was especially powerful and attractive when she was in heat. At those times, I used to think of her as the human bitch. It was a good life. I had plenty to eat, and Becky made sure that Haley and Jacob treated me nicely, especially when Jacob, who was quite small, wanted to pull my ears. Every evening, Monty took me for a long walk. I soon learned that if I walked quietly, I didn't have to be on the thing called a leash. One day, both the children looked terribly sad. "But why do we have to go? Who will look after Roger?" they wailed. My ears pricked up at the mention of my name. What was going on? I soon found out. Monty was a professor of nuclear physics at the local university. He'd been offered a very prestigious new job at a place called the Culham Centre for Fusion Energy. It was in England. He talked about what he would be doing, and it could change the world. I guessed that England was very far away and they didn't like dogs. Because Becky explained to the children, "You can't take a dog there with you. You have to put him in quarantine for 6 months before they'll let him stay with you." And they had a complicated discussion about what quarantine meant. It seemed to be a sort of prison for dogs. Haley said, "I'm not going to England. I'll stay here with Roger." But in the end, she had no choice. Monty and Becky said everyone had to go to England, except for me, of course. A few weeks later, everything in life seemed to turn upside down. Becky and Monty began putting things into boxes. The children were told to decide which of their toys they'd grown out of to be given away. Various items were photographed with cell phones, and ads were placed on something called Kijiji. Then visitors came and took the items away. Gradually, the house seemed to look quite bare. Becky told me I'd have to go back to the Humane Society. In a way, I was quite excited. I wondered whether I'd see my mother and my brothers and sisters again. Then they changed their minds, and they put an ad on Kijiji about me. This is what it said. "Wanted, good and loving home for our dog Roger. Roger is a shepherd lab cross, very gentle and good with children. Reason for needing a new home, we're relocating to England. They took pictures of me as well. One Saturday morning, the children were in tears. Monty said it was time to go to my new home. He put the leash on me and took me to the car. Becky had tears running down her cheeks. Haley and Jacob kept crying and saying, "Goodbye, Roger. We really love you. We won't forget you," and things like that. They insisted that Monty took my basket and my blanket with us so that I wouldn't forget them and I'd be comfortable when I went to sleep at night. The car ride was very sad. Normally I really like going in the car. I put my face out of the window and smell all the scenes as we went along. But this was different. We went to the other side of town to a walk-up apartment. The human was a woman a bit younger than Becky. She was called Emily. Monty made a big fuss of me before he left, and Emily put my basket in the corner of her kitchen. Monty had brought my dog bowl and a bag of dog food, and he put dry food and water out for me. Then he left. Emily's apartment was much smaller than my old family's house. It didn't have a garden to play in or children to play with. But at least I could still smell the familiar smells of home on my blanket and my basket. But I was very sad because I missed my human family. But I settled into my new life quite quickly, and after a while it was difficult to remember exactly what Monty and his family smelled like. It was even harder to recall what they looked like. Emily always seemed to be sad. She had a sad smell. It wasn't like humans smell when they're ill, but it wasn't a happy, joyful smell either. Emily talked to me about things that must have happened a long time ago, but they'd really hurt her inside. Like the way I felt hurt inside when Monty and Becky told me I couldn't go to England with them. I realised that Emily didn't have anyone else she could talk to. I did my best to cheer her up by putting my head in her lap when she sat and watched television. She stroked my head gently, and which felt very warm and friendly. Sometimes she cried tears onto my fur and I would lick her hands. We became such good friends that Emily moved my basket from her little galley kitchen into her bedroom to keep her company at night. Before long I was sleeping on her bed. In the summer Emily's apartment was very hot. It didn't have air conditioning, so we both slept on top of the bed. One night Emily had a strong human bitch smell and was crying. To try and comfort her, I licked her between the legs where the smell was strongest. It was just like meeting another dog in the park. She moaned gently and pushed herself against my snout. Roger," she said, "that's nice." After a while her body stiffened and she moaned louder. I'd never had an experience like that with a doggy bitch, but it was very enjoyable. After that, Emily encouraged me to lick her private parts quite often. She liked it and so did I. One time there was a little piece of string hanging out of her. I bit on it with my teeth and out it came. Emily was very cross because there was blood on the sheet. After that, I wasn't allowed on the bed on string nights. I don't know whether what we were doing was normal behaviour between dogs and people. I didn't have any other experience. I never did anything like that with Becky, but at their house I had to sleep in the kitchen. And anyway, Monty was the alpha male, so licking was probably his job. But Emily seemed to like it very much. She said things like, "Oh, Roger, if only I had a human boyfriend as gentle and considerate as you are." One night late in the summer, when the human bitch smell was very strong, Emily looked at me and then she rolled over on her front and crouched. She was in just the same position as a doggy bitch, so I mounted her and mated with her. It was such a relief to put my semen into her, and we both panted together. Then we fell asleep. That was how I became Emily's doggy lover. There was just one problem, though I didn't exactly obsess about it. Who was the alpha person? With Monty and Becky, the order was clear. Monty was the top dog. He mounted Becky, but she was next, because when Monty wasn't there, she told the children and me what to do and what not to do. But now things were ambiguous between Emily and me. I was used to Emily's calling me come, heel, and things like that, and I would do them. That made her the alpha member of our twosome. But now I was mounting Emily. It surely must mean that I was the alpha dog. So I started refusing to come when she called come, and I wouldn't sit when she called sit. I also started barking when I thought it was time to be fed, instead of just waiting till Emily put food in the bowl. These acts of assertions made her cross with me, but she still wanted me to mount her at night. It was all very confusing. Part 4 is by Emily. I don't know what got into Roger. All of a sudden he became less obedient than he used to be. I decided to put up with it for the moment at least because he gave me such pleasure at night. I know that's unusual, I won't say abnormal, but I do realise that Dr. Schuster would have put it down to my strong sense of libido. I never thought it would be possible to have an orgasm with a dog. I once burst out laughing at what Schuster once said, that having a pet might lead to meeting people with similar interests. But then I thought, why not? Maybe there were other women like me. So I went online to Pornhub and typed in women and dogs. To my surprise, there seemed to be quite a lot of interest in the subject. It was hard to get in touch with the actual people with my interests, but eventually I did so, and I joined a group called Doggy Swingers, women who swap doggy lovers. The trouble is that the community is very small. There are hardly any members in southern Ontario. But it did give me something to think about. Many of these women swap videos of themselves with their doggy lovers because they couldn't meet in person. Eventually I plucked up the courage to share videos too. And that's when things started to go south. I didn't know that sharing dog and woman videos is now considered to be somewhat similar to sharing child porn. The law on what's called bestiality, an unfair term for those of us who have a special relationship with our pets, has recently changed. Apparently, humans having sex with animals is now defined as animal cruelty. In my experience, Roger was always a willing and even enthusiastic partner. How cruel was it for him that he was fucking me? However, Bill C-84 now defines the offence as any contact for a sexual purpose between a person and an animal. The previous definition required penetration. I assume it was mainly directed towards men fucking animals. Under that definition, I guess that only Roger could have been charged. When two plainclothes detectives arrived at my door and asked me to come in, I asked why. A few routine questions, said the female detective. The questions were far from routine, and they culminated with her showing me a video I'd shared involving me and Roger. The police took Roger away. They put him down. I miss him very much. He was a wonderful dog, and not just as a lover, and none of this was his fault. I'll never live this down, the shame, the embarrassment. I have a court date for 3 months from now. I'm out on bail, which my parents have put up, and that means they know everything. They were in court at my bail hearing to stand bail for me. I can't face anyone I know, and I'm seriously thinking of ending it all. I have a razor blade and can run myself a hot bath any time. Maybe this evening. I'm not sure.